So delighted to welcome you here today to our lunchtime talk on Robert Tannahill's Irish songs. And Robert Tannahill, as probably most of you know, was a weaver poet of the late 18th and early 19th century, and hails from Paisley, which is not a million miles from where I grew up. So I am not going to say too much about Robert Tannahill because we have an expert here to do that, so I don't need to do that. Professor Fred Freeman is here with us today, and he wanted me to keep this short, and I am, but I couldn't really. I mean, he's no stranger to the library. He's spoken here a number of times before. He is Professor of Scots Language and Scots Song at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. He's taught Scottish literature at the School of Scottish Studies and in the English department at Edinburgh. He's the author of a number of books, including a book on Robert Ferguson, a children's book on Robert Tannahill, and has published over 100 articles on Scottish literature, folk music and history. And he was recognised by the Association of Scottish Literary Studies in 2014 with a lifetime Honorary Fellowship for his contribution to Scottish studies. So over the last decade, he has drawn on his extensive musical background, producing over 49 internationally acclaimed CDs, including the complete songs of Robert Burns and the complete songs of Robert Tannahill. And the 5th volume is just out. So I know that there are some CDs available at the back of the room that you can buy at the end of the lecture or the talk if you would like. And I'll get off the stage now, and I see Fred is chomping at the bit to get up here. So you're very welcome, Fred. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much. Well, as always, it's a privilege to be here again in this splendid library, this august building dating back to 1788, the time of Robert Burns and Robert Tannahill. And in answer to the question that many of you will have, who exactly is Robert Tannahill? Well, in simple terms, he's an 18th century Paisley weaver poet and songwriter. He was born 3rd June 1774 in Paisley to Ayrshire parents. He died on 17th May 1810. He was a radical, and that's hard to swallow for some folk. He was staunchly anti-sectarian. He was an abolitionist. His favourite poet was a Swiss Jew. He was anti-war, an anti-war advocate. In a way, he was the BNP's worst nightmare, this man, this radical, I'll have to say. This is his 250th anniversary. You see, that's the cover of the new CD, which has just been released to a standing ovation at Celtic Connections, I hasten to add. It's the final volume, recorded all 5 volumes, over 100 songs. A sobering reflection, and in the poignant words of William Tom, the Aberdeen hand-loom weaver, writing in 1844, and I'll quote him: "Pair weaver chiel, poor weaver fellow, what we owe to thee, your braes of Balwhidder, and yon Burnside, and gloomy winter, and then noble Glenafar. Oh, how they did ring about the rattling of 100 shuttles. Let me again proclaim the debt we owe to those song spirits as they walked in melody from loom to loom, ministering to the low-hearted. Which should remind us that Tannahill was part of a radical people's tradition that spans centuries in our social and cultural history in Scotland and indeed in Ireland, Northern Ireland as well. Moreover, it's no accident that William Tom cites the importance of Tannahill's pastoral songs. Those are all pastoral songs in names, for Tannahill was a major poet of nature who expanded the whole tradition of European pastoralism. What's that? Namely, the ancient tradition of European pastoral artists, Oaken kinds of all sorts, who propounded a vision in sound and in sight, we'll see that in a minute, in a minute, of the perennial utopian dream of a return to nature, a return to innocence, a return to the veritable Garden of Eden in the Bible, as it were, depicted in so many 17th century European paintings, for instance, like that of Claude Lorraine. This painting right there. Claude Lorraine, 1645, landscape of Apollo and Mercury. How strange. Apollo, Greek, Mercury, Roman. It's an imagined, important thing about this painting, it's an imagined and idealized mythological landscape. It wasn't painted from a real landscape. It's from the art of Titian and Poussin and all these other. It's a landscape of the imagination. That doesn't mean that it's inferior. It just means it originated from a different impetus. And note the fiddler. There's a fiddler playing there. In ancient Greece or ancient Rome, the instrument wasn't invented. By contrast, let's look at a painting by the Scots artist Jacob Moore, a painting from 1771, near to the time of Linn Hall, an Edinburgh painter, later 18th century. And note the difference between him and Claude Lorraine. This is an illustration of Coralin, a real place copied from nature. You can take the 191 bus, the 19 bus from Edinburgh, and be in Coralin in several minutes. It's real. Now that's a different vibe. Well, here's a pastoral song in the play that most of you will recognize. The McPeak family of Northern Ireland based one of the most famous folk songs of all time upon it, The Wild Mountain Thyme, directly based upon Tannahill. Here's how we recorded it. It's on volume 1 of the series. Go, hopefully. Volume 1, Tannahill, The Praise of Our Winner. Hopefully you'll recognize that melody. Feel free to sing when it comes in. Will you go, lassie, go, take the praise of our winner, but play by the girl, and the morning blue heaven, and the deep and the rain, like the fountains go together, so the lines of say, the praise of our winner. Will you go, lassie, go, take the praise of our winner, once I play by the girl, like the morning blue in heaven, will you go? Twine the above by the clear summer fountain, I'll cover the tower with the flows of the mountain, I'll range through the wilds and the deep woods free, I'll tunnel with the spoils in the power of the deep. Will you go, lassie, go, take the praise of our winner, but the blade that is drawn on the morning blue in heaven, will you go? Take that off. Tannahill. The point is, Balquhidra is a real place. And Tannahill's part of the 18th century Scottish movement to domesticate the pastoral vision. No longer classical landscapes, like no longer Garden of Edens or Arcadia, however exquisite these paintings are with people like Claude Lorraine or Poussin. And those are classical worlds invented. And he moved it away from that and away from what became in the hands of the English poets in the 18th century, like Alexander Pope, Arcadia, representations of idyllic ancient Greek and Roman classical landscapes miraculously teleported to England. They weren't painting England, either in song, poetry, or in painting, in fact, hence the term neoclassical. In fact, Part of Tannahill's great achievement artistically was his strong representation and sense of specific local place. Scotland, Paisley, but also Ireland, as we'll see. Furthermore, his songs stand as a corrective to 200 years of misguided scholarship that sees his lyrics, his words, in the words of T.F. Henderson, as, quote, little more than sweetly sentimental, unquote. And I've seen so many critics write that. But he said song, unlike poetry, is a unity of words and music, not just words on a page. It's precisely the way Tannahill saw it. And while posting a song to John McFarlane, he insisted, quote, this is in 1808, you must not give it away to anybody, as 'tis useless without the music. 'Tis useless without the music. Let's back up for a moment. Let's go back up for a moment. Irish connections. Well, Scotland has a long history with Ireland. Where does our very name Scotland come from? It comes from the north of Ireland, from a tribe called the Scots, who drifted apart, came across to the west of Scotland. Argyll settled in a place called Dalriada and brought one of our national languages, which you call Gaelic and we call Gaelic. They brought Christianity, they brought musical and literary traditions. In the 1600s, the Irish Confederates fought alongside the great Montrose in the civil wars in Scotland and England against the Covenanters. In the 1700s, we had seasonal workers, tatty howkers, potato pickers, and also the wild geese, mainly from Wexford, but not just from Wexford, fought alongside and died alongside Bonnie Prince Charlie in the 1745 Jacobite Rebellion. In the 1800s, we had the navvies. They built the roads in Scotland, they built the canals, they built the rail, they made the Industrial Revolution possible in Scotland. In the 1900s, we had toing and froing between Donegal and North of Ireland in general, and we had the famous, quote, tunnel tigers, who built the Scottish hydro schemes. Much of our population is necessarily of Irish stock in some shape or form. Hugh MacDiarmid, one of our great 20th century poets who had no vested interest in Irish at all, he was a border Presbyterian, said the Irish invasion, and I quote him, was destined to be the best thing that had happened to Scotland for over 200 years at least. He said it prevented our becoming absolutely dour. But it's taken some time for our country as a whole to concur with that affirmation, and Tannahill was part of that process. I want to underline, I have no vested interest in a sectarian discussion of any sort. I'm not of Irish extraction or what have you. This is not sectarian based discussion. For the Irish, especially the Irish Catholic migrants of our country, were defended by Presbyterian and Protestant socialists and others into the 20th century, like John Ferguson and Oliver Brown, and I quote them. These people are no longer to be reckoned as Irish except in origin. It is now as absurd to describe a McGinty or a Riley as necessarily Irish as to proclaim that an Ingalls must be English, a Fleming must be a Belgian, or a Wallace must be a Welshman, unquote. Well, Tannahill attended school only to the age of 12. He was apprenticed to his dad as a weaver, and it was a strange household, because if you'd seen the dining table, there was only one dining table in that house, in the main room, round that table you would have seen an escaped Virginia slave called Black Peter, Peter Burnett. The family adopted him, much to the neighbours' dismay, and they brought him up as a weaver. He wrote his autobiography as well, Peter Burnett, Black Peter he was called. Tannahill would be affected. He would be part of the abolitionist movement in his own way, as he says in one of his poems, yes, Afric's sons shall one day burst their chains. and more emphatically in a song we've just recorded for that CCL album, that last album, The Negro Girl. Right here. If I can get it, oh, come on. Here we go. Just recorded. It's on your sheet.
Yonder negro girl on exotic ones, born from a dear native soil, reluctantly born o'er the raging flood, brought to Britannia's isle, and she sang the lullaby to hush shrewd billows asleep, and she sang lullaby, lullaby to hush shrewd billows asleep.
Take that off. But I have to if I'm going to get through the songs. 1799 was a year of a failure, of crop failure in Renfrewshire. The weaving trade is completely off, so Tannahill up sticks with his brother Hugh and makes for Lancashire, and he's there for a couple of years. Based upon his experience there, and his experience in Paisley, he develops an abhorrence to sectarianism and discrimination against the Irish in Scotland. Remember, he's a practicing Presbyterian. He's a church-going Presbyterian, but he can't stand what he sees. Hence his composition of a unique body of Tannahill Scottish Irish songs. There's nothing like it in the whole of the Scottish tradition. With splendid Irish melodies he insists upon using, where the words fit the tune so well. Like, and this is on your sheet, the slow jig of One Night in My Youth. The Irish piper of the song just can't get the sultry singing off his mind. Moreover, this is worthy of our attention. Ireland in the song is, quote, fair Erin. Kitty Moore with her two lips so cherry ripe is the archetypal Irish beauty here. The Irish song she sings, Ellen Aroon, is a song that, quote, verily charmed up the moon, an Irish traditional song. The point is, and here's what our domesticated pastoral ideal comes in, all Ireland, the Irish laws, the Irish traditions are accorded high pastoral status. That's very significant. Why? Because pastoral is a representation, in his mind, to the high point of human existence, from the Garden of Eden in the Bible onwards. One Night in My Youth, from volume 3 this year. Great song.
One night in my youth, as I rode with my merry life, listening the echoes that rang through the tune. And Kitty Moore with her two lips so cherry ripe, tales as she gave us Ellen Aroon. Dear Kitty, says I, love from charmingly free, now that will take puppies, sweet voice to the pleasure, will make all the echoes run giddy with pleasure, for none in their errand can sing like it here. Chapter I fly with my heart beating gaily, I piped up the spring while so sweetly she sang. Soft melting melody filled all the valley, green woods around us in harmony rhyme. Methought that she verily charmed of the moon. Now still as I wander in the village of sea, good people follow her favorite city. I give them sweet pity and a lend a room.
Take that off. Right, why is that significant? It's significant for its social context. And this is the bleakest part of Scottish history, to my mind. We're not lily white in Scotland, we're not perfect, no, we're not. Strong democratic ethos, but we make serious mistakes, and this is one of them. There's well-recorded evidence. See James Hanley's books, look at the local press, the Bailey, the papers in Glasgow and elsewhere. The Irish in late 18th century and early 19th century Scotland were described as, quote, locusts, quote, rats, quote, vermin, associated with the spread of disease. They went from Belfast on steamships across to Glasgow, and they were not received very regally at all. They were spat at off the boats, families, they were kicked, they were beaten. There were national, quote, baiting days where any man, woman or child from any part of Ireland could be beaten with impunity. It's not a nice part of our history, no, and Tannahill could not stand it. Said it's inhumane. In Tannahill's own day, by 1810, Paisley, believe it or not, was the third largest Scottish town, a place of Irish emigration in waves, mainly from the northwest counties, Donegal, Tyrone, Derry, Fermanagh, Sligo. There were often whole families who came across on those steamships from here, from Belfast. Ironically, they gravitated towards the mechanized cotton industrial belt of Lancashire and the west of Scotland, the place that had destroyed their own textile trade, and that they had to come. They were looking for work, and they weren't wanted anymore in Ireland either. Why Paisley? It was a weaving and textile town. They came for unskilled work in the textile industry. Furthermore, by 1806, the Irish navies already worked on the Paisley and Johnston Canal. Tannahill uniquely documents the very real hard graft of the Irish and Highland hedge workers in this place right here, where I'm going. This place right here, Duntocher Burn. This is Duntocher Burn. Looks a lovely place, doesn't it? With his song that we just recorded, it's on the last album, and While Ye at Duntocher Burn, Tannahill moves us into the realms of hard reality, counter-pastoral. No, the snake in the grass, if you like, in the Bible. In fact, subtly understated social protest. It's a radical people's tradition. And you have the rough Scots language, colloquial patois Scots of the workers. The point is here, Duntocher Burn is not only a real place that Tannahill knew well, but it was a landscape continually occupied by hard, grafting labour teams throughout the poet's life. Furthermore, Duntocher Burn had a long history of textile production, and moreover, with the workforce, mainly consisting of dispossessed Highlanders from the Highland clearances and Donegal Irish Catholics, all were of particular interest to Tannahill, because, as I say, he was staunchly anti-sectarian. So when Tannahill writes his friend King on 9th May 1809, he reveals a great deal about his artistic concerns in composing such an empirically based pastoral song. Burns didn't have the courage to do it. Burns used Irish melodies, but he never represented oppressed Irish, or never, not once. And so this is firmly grounded in the real world of Scotland with its unsettling social problems. As Tannahill states in his letter, the above is written on a real occurrence, which fell under my observation, but I doubt the subject is not well suited for song. He was right, because it was rejected by his publishers. Therefore, I'm the more anxious to have your mind on it, he says to King, not in that loose, vague way. And what are you at? Duntocher from the most recent album. There we go. My tune, because the tune was lost. Pretty wild.
What you have to talk about is that you see the moment. Who's my wife behind the veils? I hate the line. Oh man, said you work so we trading business with the woman. Lay me house and lay me bed, a cup of something small man. Who's standing taking time to do the tack you blow man? Well, I see round and catch it round, keep my flute to land. Help what you get to make the town shall be full man. Where my needs is less my hair, send and see, oh man. Oh, my blessings up my tight with them, she likes to see me grow, man. She got my hose and bleach my socks, and whites and red snow, man. Every winter's mountain is a blue, the stroggy show, man. I left my wheel and penny food, gotta see, oh, man. What do you think talking about?
Pretty outrageous. Additionally, Paisley had traditional Irish connections, especially Irish Catholic connections. Most of the immigrants were Catholic, and Paisley from 1808 had the first Catholic church built since the Reformation in Scotland, since 1560. St. Mullins, which is still standing, named after an Irish Celtic monk who established the first church in Paisley in the year 580. To go back a day or two. And there was tremendous underground resistance in Paisley against the Reformation. It was described in the 17th century, quote, as a very nest of papists, unquote. For others, it was an excrescence. It was the Mother Church of Scotland, it was called, but it was an excrescence. For the general treatment of Irish navvies in Scotland, I refer you to the novel, later period, to the novels of Patrick McGill, the Donegal man who spent much of his life in Scotland. Children of the Dead End. It's a later period, as I say, but it describes perfectly. I've aborted abbreviated the quote. He's a lonely man who wanders on the roads of a strange land, shunned and despised by all men and foul in the eyes of women. There's no welcome for him at an open door when the evening comes. Christ had a mother who followed him all along the road to Calvary, but the poor tramp is seldom followed even by a mother's prayers along the road where he carries the cross of brotherly hate to the valley of the shadow of death. Pretty strong words. Despite the Catholic Relief Act of 1791 granting limited recognitions for Catholics to practice the religion in Scotland or attend schools, it was almost impossible to build St. Mullins Church in 1808. And Tannahill lived right around the corner from it. What they would do is the church would be built up during the day. By night, all the locals would tear it down, many of the locals. As Father Young notes in the centenary edition of St. Mullins, it was no uncommon occurrence to have pulled down by night what had been built by day. So then the post guards ran the church to build it. Guards. After the Sutherland Highland clearances of 1807, Scottish Highland Catholics compounded the problem as they moved to Paisley, where else, looking for work, as did the United Irishmen. The United Irishmen, 1798, trying to bring Protestants and Catholics together, and they weren't successful. Thomas Moore, he wrote songs about Irish exiles, but not exiles, however, from the United Irishmen. He didn't touch that because he was he practiced law and he thought he'd be hanged or beheaded. But always he describes exiles from the distant past. For example, he describes in the Coolin, it's on your sheet, the reign of Henry VIII, but even more powerful, as vanquished Erin, the battle of the boy in 1690, 100 years earlier. Still in a romantic vein, Tannahill is arguably less oblique in his depiction of the exiles banished from Ireland, applying the pastoral principle again. In verse 1, Ireland represents, quote, cheerful, native, plains, sweet, earning with all its joys, as against, in counter-pastoral terms, verse 2, howling winds, bodings well, wild, and the treachery, oh, that's a weighted word, treachery of exile. An unusual word choice. Some of his audience would have been most upset by that word treachery, and if the British government had cottoned on to that, he would have been hanged. He was representing the known brutality of the British government towards the United Irishmen, the divide and conquer methods of a government that deliberately pitted Protestant against Catholic. The song begs serious political questions, and historians are starting to recognize that. Gordon Pentland and people like that. And words like exile, treason, treachery are weighted words of the 1790s. Here's a song, Adieu, You Cheerful, Native Plains, which Tannahill wrote to a Monaghan melody. I think it's on volume 3 of our series. So here we go, right here. I hope. Yeah. Please.
Adieu, cheerful native place, dungeon blooms receive, not last more he remains, all the joys it gave me. Vanish from thy shore, sweet air, I through life despairing, lost and alone.
Enter Tannahill, who's disgusted with the abuse of the Irish, and he says so quite directly in his songs. He's not writing propaganda, he's writing songs, but the subjects reflect community and problems. The Irish Farmer is one of the songs where he adopts a persona of an Irish farmer in Scotland, quote, who toiled on the farm through summer and winter so dreary, who attains to an industrious life, quote, amidst pleasure and plenty, but pointedly resigns himself to a life of disaffection, quote, though some folks may still underrate us, why should we mind them a fig? I won't play that song because I won't get time. Similarly, but I will play the next one, a companion song. In his song, Irish Teaching, the expat Irish persona of the song notably advocates to send, remember Tannahill's a practicing Presbyterian, to send for the Irish priest, Father O'Jenkins, to educate the children, his sons, to advance socially. A policy wholly in keeping, incidentally, with the educational values espoused by the priest of St. Mirren's. The song's written in the form of a letter from the Irish expat chappie to his people back home. Dear Judy, I've taken a thinking. Their children, their letters must learn, and will send for old Father O'Jankin to teach them 3 months in a barn. But he talks about disaffection. Now, Burns uses an Irish melody for the song Man Was Made to Mourn, but he never mentions Irish. Tannahill does directly. The man that won't feel for another, and he goes on, it's just like a colt on the moor, etc. A good song, a lively melody, Irish teaching to the air, Sir John Scott, from CD Volume 3. So, right here, there you go. Good melody.
Dear Judy, I thinking that children and letters must learn, and send for old Father O'Jankin to teach them 3 months in the barn. For learning's the way to promotion, culture brings food from the sod, and whiskey get them over the notion how matters are doing abroad. No father neglected my reading, I soldier his spirits in rest for the very first part of his reading, still they believe in distress. And late when the traveller united sought hospitality's claim, he lodged him till morning delighted, thus was a lesson to them. The man that won't feel for another, he's just like a colt on the moor.
You get the point. Anyway, I don't have time to play the dozen or so Tannahill Irish songs, but briefly to elucidate my point with just the odd example. In his song, Ye Friendly Stars That Ruled the Night, it's on your sheet, we have a happy love affair in the context of an idealised Limerick county with, quote, gay St. Patrick's morning, all the flowery pastures that deck fair Limerick County, and also a proud reference to, quote, all the Irish nation. His neighbours were jumping up and down. I can tell you he was in trouble. And he writes even a bit of what he took to be Irish Gaelic in his chorus. Now he mixed and melded, as we say. He mixed with the Irish community in Paisley and Glasgow, and he took down the song. He said he was going to publish a book of Irish melodies. Couldn't find a publisher of mine, but that's another. A bit of Ye Friendly Stars That Ruled the Night. A cooking jig, as my players would say, as I would say as well. Yes. There we go. Good cooking jig.
He friendly starts to throw the night, and hail my glad return. And shut his sleep, he writes his gates in Patrick's morn. My lifetime heavy on my mind, the spirits are brooding o'er me. Now all my cares are full behind, your eyes go before me. Gamble, how my heart will bruise me. Gamble, not now she lose me.
Tannahill played the flute, by the way, and so he was playing all the stuff as well. In Sheila My Darling, we have a soldier leaving his sweetheart for war, and he asked her to reflect, quote, think on our days of pleasure, one wandering by the Shannon side, when summer days give leisure to stray amidst their flowering pride. These are all fighting words. Come on. In his final leave-taking, he conjures up what's known as the literary sublime of a pastoral Ireland. Quote, farewell ye lofty mountains, ye flowers, wilds we wont to rove, ye woody glens and fountains, the dear retreats of mutual love. No wonder his publishers wouldn't touch that. George Thompson published it, I'm not getting near that. No way. But Tannahill was not a political reformer. He's not a polemicist, but an artist. Like Claude Lorraine or like Jacob Moore, his songs and ballads give us an insight, as Hamish Henderson, my great mentor, would have said, to the development of community as it unfolds. And in Tannahill, pastoral is his metaphor, his metaphorical measure for civilization. And idealized nature is in so many of his conventional pastoral songs, Scotland and Paisley and Ireland, devoid of social division and bigotry. Quite often this is a literary voice in Tannahill rather than a realistic Scots vernacular voice, but it does enunciate a serious philosophical principle of the time. Tannahill, to a greater or lesser degree, uses pastoral as a literary metaphor, a vehicle for voicing his disillusionment with his society. And this natural metaphor, think about it, it was especially interesting at the time. Thomas Paine, in his Age of Reason, 1794, at just this time, argues for truth, revelation, as accessible to all men and women, not through logic or speech, but through, wait for it, the universal language of nature itself, unquote, hence pastoral metaphor. Just again, to give you a feeling of this metaphor, it is somewhat formal idiom, and though still a bit like Balquhidder, phrase about speaking about a real place. We have While the Grey Pinion Lark, which is on volume 1 of the first things we recorded. Beautiful song. I'll play a bit of it. First one, he says, here nature first waked me to rapture and love and taught me her beauties to sing. And there's a revelation in nature there. And I told the singer, if you don't crescendo on this revelation, person gets up in the morning and she sings, and the sun, newly risen, sheds the mist from our eyes. It's a revelation in nature. Beautiful pastoral song of Tannahill's, not known, should be. Here we go. Listen to that.
While the great pinions lie, adding arrows to the sky, and cheerily hails the sweet dawn, and the sun, newly risen, sheds the mists from my eyes, and smiles over nights and morn. Delighted I stray by the field side, where the dewdrops of crowbars adorn, and nature arrayed in her midsummer's pride, sweetly smiles to smile all
Song, and not very well known. Here we go. Yeah, that's straight conventional pastoral, nature, enlightenment. For a counter-pastoral, Tannahill wrote songs where the ideal state of nature is threatened by what this weaver, the self-educated weaver, called the war system, in inverted commas. How sophisticated is that? You have to go to Karl Marx 100 years later, almost, The poet's short life, 1774 to 1810, in fact spanned a period of continuous war in Britain and across Europe. From the Anglo-France War, the 1778 onwards, through the Napoleonic Wars, thus war, or young men going off to war, is an occasion for so many Tannahill songs. A very substantial piece of counterpastoral, it's one of my favourites. William Tom the Weaver mentions it in 1844. The Braes of Glenafort presents the vision of war and loss in these metaphorical terms. Here we have a more acoustia, more authentic Scots vernacular voice with a very personal, effective winter metaphor. For example, Johnny goes off to war, leaving his lassie, and she says, "Now it is winter with nature and me." It's the opposite of what the English Romantics were saying. They were saying, if you go out to a sunny day, you're inspired, you're happy. The American Transcendentalists said the opposite. If you're miserable inside, the sun can shine. It doesn't make a difference. And that's what Tannahill, he agreed with them, with what Ralph Waldo Emerson, people like that. The Braes of Glenafort, one of his best. Again from Vol I, this one. Play a bit of it. Go. Yeah, a bit of it.
Changed me the time when I met my love. Among the bushes I stand in shore. The wells of summer must be the symphony, and may the sun breathe again but parted a counting immense journey. And it is a winter with nature. And now the banner lost the flights and she.
Hold on, I hate to take it off. Let me hear a couple other things. Right here, many of the war songs are perhaps somewhat nostalgic. I disagree with the critics, though underpinned by absolutely captivating melodies, words and music, which stand up very well as songs rather than as poems, despite what the critics may seize upon. Like Green Inishmore, where Tannahill combines pastoral, the literary sublime, with an Irish soldier's returning home, having forgotten all that he missed that was beautiful about, quote, the happy scenes of early life of his youth in Ireland. Quote, "Ye dear native mountains that tower on my view, wet joys to my mind you restore. The happy scenes of my life you renew, and you never seemed so charming before." The lovely Green Inishmore from CD Volume 4. I've got the singer singing in a Chinois manner. You'll hear
How light is my heart as I journey along. Now my perilous service is o'er. I think of sweet home, and I carol a song in remembrance of her I adore. How sad was the hour when I bade her adieu. Her tears spoke her grief, though the words were but few. She hung on my bosom and sighed, "Oh, be true, when you're far from small.
Counterpastoral, aye, but it's not too much to compare many of Tannahill's poems and songs to the art of his exact contemporary in Spain, the artist Francesco Goya, who himself makes such a comparison. Quote, painting like poetry chooses from universals what is most apposite, ingeniously composed. It results in that happy imitation by virtue of which the artist earns the title inventor and not of servile copyist. Right here, Goya's The Execution of the Rebels, 3rd May 1808. That's not it, so that's it. The Execution of the Rebels on 3rd May 1808. If you don't believe in my comparison, I'll play you, since I don't have the drum here right now, Tannahill's poem, The Recruiting Service Drum. He was disgusted with the fact that recruiters would come through the town and beat their drums and coerce people, normal people, this is on CD, Vol 4, into conscription. There we go. Oh, this is short. A self-reciting Vol 4.
I hate that drum's discordant sound, parading round and round and round. To thoughtless youth it pleasure yields, and lures from cities and from fields, to sell their liberty for charms of tawdry lace and glittering arms, and when ambition's voice commands, fight and fall in foreign lands. I hate that drum's discordant sound, parading round and round and round. To me, it talks of ravaged plains and burning towns and ruined swains, and mangled limbs and dying groans, and widows' tears and orphans' moans, and all that misery's hand bestows to swell the list of human woes.
Powerful stuff. And the critics didn't even believe that he wrote stuff like that. I can play The Defeat of the French, but I'm chewing up the time, and so I'll move on. That's sweetly sentimental, question mark, hardly. Also enlightening. His occasions for 2 of his war songs, the death of his close friend at the Battle of Corunna, Spain in 1809, the time of this chappie, Goya. The other recorded on the final album, The Moving the Soldier's Funeral, which can easily stand as a poem alone. I wonder if I can squeeze in a tiny bit of this before I start to move to, to one of my last songs. Right. Right here. Oh, just a bit of it. Soldier's Funeral. This is my melody, actually. The melody's lost. Powerful words.
In camp or in quarters, he still was the same. Each countenance brightened wherever he came. Ye cheerful would say, all the world wants his home. And when the fierce conflict of armies began, he fought like a lion, yet felt as a man. For when British bravery had vanquished the foe, he'd weep for the dead by his valor laid low.
And I realise I'm chewing up the clock. Well, Tannahill, with his Irish songs, often parodies the 18th century sentimental love song. He's not doing it at all. Many of the songs are gloriously funny, caricatures and what have you, along the lines of, and I don't have time to do this, of Geeky, Walter Geeky, the Edinburgh artist from the period, the drunken Carol, the drunken fellow. And he writes songs along these lines as well, and he talks about the demon drink and all sorts of things like that in a funny way. I'll give you an example. We'll play one more song anyway. This song, Peggy Rafferty, he lightly chaffs the Irish migrant labourer with a bit of nostalgia. The guy's a bit nostalgic and a bit randy in the song Peggy Rafferty. And here he does something unique in the Scottish literary tradition of the 18th century. He clearly defines the position of the expat Irishman from his own Irish point of view. In verse 2, Scotland, thy lasses are modest and bonny, but here every Jenny has her own Johnny. And though I might call them my jewel and my honey, my heart is at home with sweet Peggy Rafferty. He's having fun with this. Peggy Rafferty is a light comic mouthful written to the abandon of a lively Irish jig. That in itself is significant. When I give a whole lecture on musical forms of the meaning, abundance of playful feminine rhymes. How could I bear in my bosom to leave her in absence? I think her more lovely than ever, etc. It goes on. Wistful, I think of my dear native mountains, their green shady glens and their crystalline. What he's saying essentially, if the Irish folk are to be assimilated in Scotland, then I can chaff them, I can tease them the same way I do our own folk, our own Paisley folk. They're one of us, so they can take a wee bit of flack as well. And that's what he's saying. He's having a good time with them. If this is a tongue-in-cheek, nostalgic pub song in a way for an expat Irishman, it is wholly sympathetic, recognizing that one often laughs at what one would otherwise cry over. The Irish persona of the song is not a caricature, is not a buffoon, but alas, a human creature, drawn sympathetically, if humorously, expressing in socially acceptable way powerful feelings of nostalgia. In psychological terms, to be high-flown, a form of sublimation. As Gershon Legman says in The Rationale of the Dirty Joke, tell me what you laugh at, and I will tell you who you are. Peggy O'Rafferty. Oh, now we gotta find the song. Hey. It's a great song. Written to the air. Peggy O'Rafferty.
Oh, bright violet, green-coated fairy, I skip o'er the ocean, to dear Tipperary, where all the young fellows are blithesome and merry. When we were the men, sweet Peggy O'Rafferty, how could I dare in my bosom to leave her in absence? I think her more lovely than ever, because of her beauty, I'm all in a fever since I was named, sweet Peggy O'Rafferty. Scotland, my lasses are modest and bonny, but here every Jenny has got her own Johnny. And though I might call her my jewel and my honey, my heart is a poet, sweet Peggy O'Rafferty. Wistful I think on my dear naked mountains are green. She glens and their crystal like mountains. Cease to sigh, gave a deep sigh up from pensions, and ever I lift my sweet Peggy O'Rafferty. Fortune was I over like foolish notion, but left me to go o'er the wide rolling ocean. But what now to me? All its awful motion, since I am so far from Peggy O'Rafferty. Round me as many thirteen as will carry me down through the country and over the ferry. All highly straightforward and dear Tipperary, and never more leaves me Peggy O'Rafferty.
Goes on. And before I close, I'd like to say thanks very much to Patsy Horton, to Annie, to the woman, I don't know her name, back at the desk there, to the Linn Hall Library yet again, to my grandson Darrell, who's at Queen's University Belfast, grandbairn, we would say, but doesn't like such a term. I can remember when he was bottle fed, now he's bottle fed. No. Right. Robert Tannahill died a suicide in his 36th year. In his own words, the death of, quote, an obscure verse-making weaver. Obscure, but in this 250th anniversary year, not wholly forgotten. As William Tom reflected with a sobering reminder of our debt to the, quote, song splits into one, Robert Tannahill, and I quote him, "Who dare measure in doubt the restraining influence of these songs? To us they were all instead of sermons. Church bells rang not for us. Poets were indeed our priests, but for those, the last relic of our moral existence, we have passed away." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fred. You travelled far and wide there with Robert Tannahill. The music was terrific to hear that this afternoon as well. I'm very conscious of the time and that we're normally set to.
Yeah.
I will take one burning question. Otherwise, I'll leave you to. There's a burning question.
You can ask me back then if you're interested in CDs. You can see them, but you can ask them personally.
I'll take one question, one.
Yeah, well, I've got an interest in Tannahill as much as I went to St Mary's School in Queen Street in Paisley.
Oh yeah.
And directly across the road was Tannahill's cottage. So
that's right.
But I'm a songwriter myself.
Yeah.
Always interested in this song that you mentioned, the Braes of Balquidder.
Balquidder, yeah.
And Loch Lomond.
Yeah.
And my friend Jim McLean, who's also from Paisley, from Canal Street, has written many Scottish songs, including The Massacre of Glencoe.
Yeah.
He did a thesis at university.
Yes.
Where he says the song that we now know as Go Lassie Go by the McPeaks in Belfast was a totally unique and original song. I, in my own opinion, can't see that. I see it directly taken from the Braes of Balquidder.
It is. Yeah, it's been cited many times.
And I wonder.
Yeah.
I mean, I just said to my friend about, I don't think you can just write one song and it's a hit all over the world. It's like the North Koreans claiming Camille's song hit a golf ball and it went a hole in one, and that's how they invented golf. I wonder what
Well, it's been cited many times, but Tannahill mentions in the fourth verse the Wild Mountain Thyme, that direct line, and the song's called the Wild Mountain Thyme. And there's more, and there's a very close connection. You get there melodically as well.
Yeah.
So it's there. They even mention the Wild Mountain Thyme in the song. As I say, I'm happy to take questions. You can ask them personally to me as well. And if anybody is interested in albums, you're welcome to it, or just questions.
Thanks for you settled the question of Wild Mountain.
Oh, yes.
Go Lassie Go settled. Thanks so much. It was just terrific. It's great to hear the music, and the CDs are available at the back, and Fred is very happy to chat after. Thanks so much to all of you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Fred.
Thank you.